Well, hello everyone. Oh, hey now. I wasn't aware that you'd be making an appearance. So yeah, for everyone who's joining, I'm gonna try to talk a little bit, but I'm not gonna talk much, just because I don't know how technical everyone understands things. So if you have a question about what I'm doing, feel free to just ask in the chat, and I'll get to it. But to kind of recap what I did yesterday and what I'm going to be continuing today is I'm currently working on entity and item support, as you can see in the stream. And right now I'm finishing with MBT definitions. So these will be used when saving to convert any entities or items or block entities from what they exist in the editor to what should be on the disk, which should be saved to the files. And we kind of, there's a little bit of an algorithm being created, not with the JSON file, which is on the right, but the code that's on the left side of the screen. But there's a lot of intricate components I'm going to be writing today. Mostly being able to reference other structures in the JSON file. So if you have if you want to have an equipment tag on a creeper, if you want to have a creeper have a helmet, uh, I'm gonna make the definition files allow for an item to be entered. So you don't have to, if you're a person who's creating a definition file for a new entity, you don't have to duplicate everything that's already been made for the creeper. You can kind of take all the common tags that entity has and just kind of inherit those. And then if it has a special tag that takes in an item or something, it will then take all the previously defined item NBT and add it into your definition file. So it'll hopefully make it a lot more concise. And if items change, if an NBT tag and an item changes, we just make a change to that file, and then when we reload the file, everything will change for all entities and things that use the item NBT structure. So hopefully we'll get to that. And yeah, just feel free to watch along or ask questions or anything. So yeah. I think I said I probably won't talk much unless there's a question. So if you want me talking, ask a lot of questions and I'll try to answer them. Also, let me know if the music's a little too loud or I'm too loud. I'm still kind of new to this entire streaming business. So now actually I'm going to switch over to Minecraft because the last kind of NBT thing I need outlined here is the debug stick. But the wiki page for the item format says a compound tag should be a list, even though it shouldn't be. If there's a little confusion that I think there is on the wiki page, so I'm going to go in game and I'm going to see if what the wiki page has is correct or if they just have the wrong icon for the NBT tag. So this is also hoping my computer doesn't crash because of all the stuff happening right now. So now I'm opening up NBT Explorer to view the NBT of the item. There we go. Interesting. Also, if someone watching the stream can explain to me the debug stick, I know it changes block states, but if you can go to, I'll post the link. Can I link to this part? Hold on. I'm posting a link in the chat, but if anyone can go to the data value section on that page on the wiki page and tell me if it's should be a list tag or a compound tag. Because I'm really confused as to why there's a compound tag, but it's acting as a list, which usually shouldn't happen. Okay. After a little bit of experimenting, what happens is it limits what the debug stick can edit. So that's actually fairly easy to do. Yep. Uh, just to let everyone else know, Noir, if you don't know already, he's the other developer of Amulet, uh, and we basically trade notes on commits, and he's just gonna ask a few questions in the chat about what I have committed to the repository. So just to update everyone else who's watching. Are the JSONs you created the Amulet entities, or are they a specific version? So what I have done currently with the JSON files is what I'm currently writing up are what would be Java 1.13 definitions, or at least that's what I believe they are. I'm just going off of what the wiki page says for the most part, since there's no real official versioned things where it says like these are all the tags present in a 1.12 world, these are all the tags present in a 1.13 world. So I'm just kind of going off of normal wiki page information, so that might be a little bit behind. So yeah, they're specific versions, but I'll get to why I've not done Amulet entities if you'd like to know. So the list length thing we talked about, not really. Position, rotation, and motion are probably gonna have to be specific cases we have to test for. But for the most part, I've kind of gone away with uh, restricting the list to a certain length, just because besides those three-ish tags, there might be a few more. All other lists can kind of grow without bound. There is no uh, set length for any other tag lists. So I think it'd be better just to let everything grow without bound, and then for those special cases, restrict it back down to the first three elements. Okay, thank you, Nick, for that clarification. Yeah, I'll I'll probably edit the wiki page to count. No, it's reversed. I don't know if I've committed that update. It might be wrong on what I committed, but what I have locally is the correct way. Max. Uh, Yeah, count can be negative. It actually results in the item stack being infinite, I believe, is the correct. Uh, let's see. Values below 1 are displayed in red. I know in previous versions, probably like a 1.2 official release, uh, negative values would create an infinite item stack, so you could use it without ever running out of items. Kind of like creative, but for also survival. Max. All bytes should have a range of negative 128 to 127. Yes, technically that is allowed, but for some MBT things, they restrict it to only one. For like Unbreakable, uh, you could have a value of 128, but the Unbreakable tag only works or only really accepts officially 0 and 1 for the value. So we have uh, a thing in our MBT parser, or as this would be template parser, to clamp that value to that 0 to 1 range. So you can just add whatever. So it kind of just clamps it down. Hold on. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Now I forgot that that is that whatever MBT library you use will automatically do that. But for a lot of other byte tags, which are used as booleans, I'll leave the range in just to prevent any weirdness. Because I know, at least in the past, I've encountered some weird issues when I've put invalid MBT values in, but they may fix that. So now I I just finished item JSON. This is basically, for the most part, the outline of all the MBT tags an item can have officially. What the system currently does is when you load in a world, what I'm hoping the system will be, is that we load the MBT data straight from the save file. We don't really do that much changing to the MBT. We might normalize the ID tags for entities and items, just so when extensions are being written and you're adding in your own code, you don't have to have all these different if statements for different versions and how they define shovels or creepers. Because I know if you go far enough back in Minecraft history, entities were originally the IDs were integers and now they're strings. Okay, so for position, I think we're the system we talked about earlier now, where we would make it chunk local. So we would bring it down so it'd be 0 through 16 for that chunk, and then just have a method or whatever that moves the entity to a different chunk. So like translate it across the trunk. So position I haven't really gotten to yet, just because that's a very the position tag's a very interesting one, just because I don't know like we've talked a little bit on how we want to handle position, but I don't think we've necessarily fully agreed on a system. So I was gonna wait until you and me could talk about that before uh, going all into that. So I've mostly just been focusing on what uh, items have, and then I was gonna get to entities in a bit. Oh, okay. I'll I'll talk to you later now. I'll update you on the progress I get uh, at some point after the stream. Yes, so we will once we have uh, entity support, tile entity support, or block entity support, and kind of just the general basics of world editing. So like selection boxes, filling, cloning, and probably maybe a few others. We will release kind of a alpha slash beta build just to have everyone test it, see how everyone likes it, and then from there we'll take feedback and start releasing kind of iterations of these testing releases before doing the final release. So it'll kind of work a little bit like how MC Edit and MC Edit Unified and MC Edit 2 have kind of worked in the past, where we get alpha builds, you test them, and then we get hit the final release, and then that's when it will only be mostly final releases. So yes, there will be a bare bones version at some point. Okay? So lists are interesting. So I'm not stopping a type list. So if you actually look, hold on. Explosions here is an interesting thing. I'll get back to that in a bit. If I go to enchantments, enchantments are a list. So what's going to happen is they have what I call a schema, or schematic basically, which details the structure of the tag that each entry should be. So for enchantments, basically, each item should be a compound tag that then has an ID tag that's a string, and a level tag that's a short. So then when you go to save, it'll iterate through the list that we currently have in memory that you can edit, and it will change any mismatched types of things. So for example, if you have an ID tag of uh, integer or something for whatever reason, it'll convert that to a string tag, and so on and so forth. So it kind of enforces a little bit of conformity throughout the entire list, since list tags themselves don't really have a type. The closest you get to that is like an int array or a long array. There's no real set like short list or double list. Yeah, yeah. If I were to actually uncollapse all of these, it would be a lot of text. So I've collapsed a little bit. And then for can destroy, for example, that's just a list of string tags. There's no compound or anything. So there, you just tell the schema that it's a type string, and then it'll go through the list and it'll make sure that each tag in that list is of type string, and that's all it'll do. It won't really. We don't have any value conversion yet. So if you have a string 1, or if you have a tag that's a type of int, it'll convert to a type of string, but it won't actually convert that value to a string yet, just because that's a little harder to do at this stage, since we don't know the entire structure of everything else and how it interacts. Any idea of when the alpha will be? I would really like to say when the alpha will be out, but I don't want to necessarily say, just because this is not our main job in a sense. Like I still have college. I'm still I still have a really big time commitment that takes up most of my time, and I focus on that. I'm currently on break. That's why I'm able to do this. But I currently have a really big time commitment, and and that varies day to day, week to week, how much time I can devote to Amulet. So I don't want to promise anything and then miss that, or miss that promise just because something got in the way or something happens. So I want to say early 2019. I won't necessarily give a month or a date, but we want to get this out as soon as possible to have you guys testing it. And also, once I'm done with uh, this and kind of entity MBT stuff, it will be out on the repository and you can download it. And if you are knowledgeable enough and want to, you can run it from source, so you can kind of get a little preview. But we don't have any UI committed yet, so right now it's just you can look at the code and see how it's working, and then we have a little bit of a command line version that you can use that will allow you to kind of just mess around with uh, Amulet, but you can't save yet because we need to have all these other things in place like entities and block entities set tested before we move on to implementing the saving, because we don't want to mess up any worlds that people may test on in the process of working out these systems. So once we have saving done, that's probably the biggest thing before the alpha is saving and UI. Once those two are at least in the works or a place where we're comfortable with, that's when we'll probably let everybody know and put it out. Yeah, thank you guys for your questions. Oh, just realized music has stopped. So like, will we be parsing the JSON components, or will we just be presenting them as a string? Is that your question? As of right now, I'm not personally aware that we'll be parsing them, but that may be something in the future. That may be something that someone from the community can help us with, and or they can uh, add in as an extension. We're not really sure on that. That's just because we just want to get the base systems out and finished, the most important ones, entities, all that stuff, before we work on any extra stuff. So that's kind of a little bit more down the pipeline, more than anything else. All right, cool. So what I just checked is that uh, you can actually reference other MBT structures now in JSON files. So if you have, oh, that's, so if you have an MBT structure that implements that uses a common thread, like an entity uses items, it can actually include items in its MBT definitions. So you don't actually need to completely redefine an entity when you implement the item MBT structure for a different version. Because right now 1.13 is basically going to be done through this right now. As of right now, 1.13 is all implemented. So cool. That's something I wanted to get done today. So now I need to do a little bit of work with fireworks because fireworks are very much an interesting thing because now that I have the system in place, I can actually reduce some complexity because explosion for fireworks, there's an explosion tag, but then there's also the fireworks tag that has a whole bunch of these same formats in a list. So I can now actually have the list have this tag plus the tag itself referenced from a different file. So yep, that is correct. Thank you, Max. So now I'm on .json, I can do, instead of having to write all that out again, I can do explosion and then have it be type. Actually, get that out of there. Tag type explosion, and then see here it's already referenced in this type field, tag type. So now if I were to rerun this, if we were to look at, or let's put something like this here, we scroll up to this long dictionary right here. If we keep scrolling, first we see that all the tags are there. This is what's called the template. So this is not actually what each item will have. It's just when we save, it'll go through each key in the dictionary. And if the item that it's currently needing to save has that tag, it will apply the template. It will say, okay, I'm going to check to make sure the types match. And if it's missing any tags that are required, aka they have a default value, if it's missing any of those, it inserts them in. It puts them in as the type if they're missing. And if they're not missing, it just checks to make sure the types match. And if it's a ranged tag, so it needs to be between like a 0 or a 1, it will also make sure the value of that item that's being saved, that MBT tag has a value between 0 or 1, and if not, it clamps it. So if it's supposed to be 0 or 1 and you have it at like 5, it'll bring it to 1. But if you have it at negative 10 or something, it'll bring it to 0. So it brings it to the closest bound. So just need to see here if explosions saved. So explosion. I have to rerun it again because I forgot to remove the outer tag. Step over and then so there we go. So this explosion tag here that has flicker, trail, type, colors, and fade colors is now actually referenced by just being able to put it in angle brackets. And then if we look at the fireworks tag here, so for fireworks there's the flight tag, that's a byte, and then it has the explosions tag, which then is what's called a schema MBT structure, which then has the internal explosion tag structure in it, and that's what it'll conform all entries of the list to. So I think that's great, because now if there's something that's reused between entities or items, I don't have to define it in both. I can define it in one, and then if there's a bug or we miss the type in one of them, mistype, we can just change that file and it is reflected across all of them. But if there's something special between them, we just either break it apart in the file or we just copy that definition to one and then make the necessary change. So that's something I really was hoping would work pretty seamlessly. So the next thing I wanted to work on was multiple tags. So this is something I discovered while working on this. What happens if the tags don't match? It will take whatever the template type is, and it will change the type of the original. So I guess how to phrase it. If the flight tag for fireworks, for example, for the item that you're editing in world is a short, it'll take the template tag, which says it should be a byte, and it will override what's in the world when you save. So if you were to save it as a Java 1.13, it'll say, hold on, Java 1.13 wants this as a byte, so it'll change the type of the tag to a byte. But if you enter a tag that we don't have in our dictionary, so for example, Minecraft comes out with a new tag for items, and we haven't updated our MBT definitions yet. We ignore it. We don't do anything with it. We just save it as is. We don't do any weird messing with it. So that's how we kind of keep it from it overriding things it shouldn't, but also preventing it from not being flexible. So it's kind of, we want it to kind of be the best of both worlds. So now what I want to work on is something that doesn't really frustrate me, but I discovered yesterday while working on this is that skulls can actually have they can have the same tag name, but it can be two completely different types. It can either be a string or it can be a compound tag, which then has all this other data in it. And the one thing is that we didn't really account for that when we started the system. So I'm gonna have to kind of like tack that on as an extra feature. And so in order to do that, interesting. It's actually, huh. So yeah, it can exist as either a string or a compound tag. So I'm going to implement that by a little bit of trickery, as it were. So oh, it is. So is it saved? Because when I saw it, it was saved as a string and a compound tag. But when you save the world, does it only do uh the compound tag? All right. Okay. Let's actually do some testing. Let's fire up Minecraft and let's see what happens. Because that may be because if it is just converted to a compound tag on saving, that would help out a lot more. That would help out a lot, and I wouldn't have to kind of do this weird workaround stuff with it. So I'm gonna pull up MBT Explorer, and we're gonna take a little look. Ah, interesting. This was just working for me earlier. Ah, here we go. Volatile entities. Okay. So, at least when it's placed in the world, it uses the compound tag. So we're going to see if that happens in Okay, it does convert it to a compound tag on saving. Okay. I don't know what happened then with the previous time I tested this, but now now I'm a little bit smarter. So let's see. I really don't want to implement all of this in Entity because it is kind of shared with Skulls a bit in game. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to make it into inheritable thing instead of oh, interesting. Well, that was simple. So yeah, Skull Owner is now implemented, so that's good. The last thing for items is the debug property. And that's because or not necessarily sadly, but the way the debug property works is that there is no real structure to the tag, really. It's a compound tag. Actually, I think I can pull up the save file to show what happens. I don't believe this is entities. That's a skull. That's also the skull. I believe this is it. Nope. This is one thing I do like. I always put, whenever I'm testing things, I start out at 0, 0. So that I can kind of just quickly iterate through all of the chunks, and it's still not working. So we're gonna launch the game and put those back into my inventory. Please bear with me. We kind of do. The way we do blocks is we have an internal list of all the blocks, and we have each version or format has a list of blocks and then says what blocks map to our internal blocks. The only problem with the debug properties tag is not the block ID or anything like that. It's that it's not a traditional structure where it relies on using both the name and the value of a tag to determine something. So you can have just Minecraft dirt, you can add that in and it'll work with Minecraft dirt. While most other tags, the name is needed, but it doesn't affect anything. So like name, for example, let me go to a different one. So for, I guess, a simple one would be the damage tag. The game looks for the damage tag, but it really only uses the value. So I know that it expects someone tag name damage, and then the value can be whatever. But for debug properties, the difference is that the name can be anything. It can be Minecraft dirt, it can be Minecraft stone, it can be granite, it can be whatever. And the way we currently have our structure written is the names aren't used in that way. The names really can't be anything. It has to be damage or map color or something like that. So it's not a weakness in our format. I just have to adapt our parser to kind of take a special direct when it sees it when parsing the JSON file to take that directive and go like, oh, okay, I don't actually need to know anything. Yeah, it has to be kind of generated differently, which is good. I like it. I actually do like how they did that. It's just from a like not debugging standpoint, but from a tool standpoint of working with the format, we I wasn't 100% aware that was going to be the way they did it. But it is a very smart way on how they implemented it. So, oh, I'd have to open up MBT Explorer again. Quick little fix. So what I'm doing now is we know that different formats and different versions will have different oddities with their tags. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of creating a hook. So in a future version, if uh, uh, the debug property or however the format is changes, we still keep uh, the original behavior of this tag. But if we need to change it, we kind of alter it a bit. So we then allow other versions to kind of change how these special edge case tags can be parsed, in other words. So I'm going to actually make this Actually, no, wait. I'm actually making the system more complicated. So, yep. So, I was overthinking it. So, since the debug property, I'm not emulating anything about the debug property. So I don't actually care about the value or the name of the tag, which is how I was approaching it originally. So I actually just solved it by just saying the tag type's a string and leaving it as that, because that's in reality all all we care about. So yeah, I think entity or items are done. Items are done. So now on to entities, which is going to be a lot harder. A lot harder than I know, right? Ooh, entities. Ooh, big, scary, and exciting. It's just gonna be more Jason. Hopefully there's well, I hope to write code because code is fun, but I also hope not to write a lot of code because if I'm not writing a lot of code, then that means the system we've kind of engineered is solid. It'll work under a lot of different conditions, which is what uh what we're hoping. So yeah, just a reminder to everyone who has joined and haven't been here since the beginning of the stream. I'm mostly just going to be typing and programming, and I'll try to explain a little bit, but I'm not going to be doing that a whole bunch just because I don't know what interests what I'm doing, like what aspects of what I'm doing interests everybody. So if you want me to explain something, or you just want me to talk about something, feel free to ask me a question. It doesn't have to be what I'm actively doing. It can be just something about Amulet or kind of whatever. Uh, but if you don't have a question, you can I'll try to talk a little bit like I said, and if not, you just get to listen to some approaching Nirvana, which I, you know, not necessarily a bad thing. Why is the length? Okay, so Nar actually asked this question, but I'll revisit it. Uh, so the reason why the length of position and motion and rotation aren't really uh, explicitly stated is at least right now with how I'm programming this is that those are kind of special cases. For almost everything else besides those three tags, the list can be however long it wants to be. There is no limited length. So as of right now, I'm just kind of go about the generic way that I'm treating all list tags can have infinite amount of items in them, even though in reality that's not even possible. But and then I'll probably, when we go to the actual saving logic, it will cut down position, motion, and rotation down to their equivalent lengths. Uh, the only reason why I'm not doing that now is because I want the format to kind of stay as generic as possible. And then once everything or almost everything's been implemented, we can kind of go back through and say, okay, do we like we can have it so technically the length is optional, but we can kind of judge from there. In other words, I don't want to design something for the system that limits lengths and then realize later down the road that we could have done it a different way. This is just purely for the most part prototyping and just seeing how it all looks together, and then from there we can do those kind of small things. But it'll either be in saving logic or be in this that we handle the length. I could uh, generate a script. The only problem with that is, Vincent, is that at least not that I know of, there are no official ways to get MBT data from the game, so I'm just having to go off of the wiki. But the reason why I'm hand typing it is because some tags are optional and some are required, and that's not really stated in the wiki in any kind of like parsable way, because sometimes it says optional, sometimes it says default, and when it says default, I take that as it's a required tag. And sometimes like has that missing entirely. So I don't. So making a parser would be able to work, but it doesn't. But also the format of the way the wiki lays it out is kind of different. Actually, if I could, I wish I could link to direct sections, but on the chunk format page under tag or entity format, it says position has 3 tag doubles in text, but for rotation it has 2 separate entries for floats. Now, someone could easily change that on the wiki, and I'm not good enough at wiki editing, but for a parser to go through that on a web page, I would have to have a lot of edge cases where they state the tag name or like the type of each entry in that position list as a tag double, but then 2 tags later have it look for the actual float tag icon. And this also allows me to do little extra stuff like, I don't know if you're here for the item, but for here I actually broke out the explosion tag type, because explosion can both be its own tag or it can be an entry in a list called explosions. So from there I was kind of able to optimize it by breaking out into its own sub-JSON or its own file, so then I can reference it multiple times in item.json without having to rewrite those tag types over and over again. And a parser for that would, I guess, it would reduce the work a little bit, but I uh, I just don't really have the knowledge, and this is mostly just getting it out so then we can kind of stress test it. That's kind of a long explanation. I'm sorry if that was a little long, but that's kind of how I'm approaching this. But that is a good idea. I just feel like I would have a lot of edge cases that I have to deal with and end up spending a little more time making sure it works for what I need to do reliably versus just going through it and typing it out. So I hope that answers your question adequately. Oh, so it autofills everything. Uh, that works, but I don't know if I've explained this recently. I try to keep it coming up every once in a while. But this is, we're kind of making a templating system where we list out all the possible tags, and then when we load in a world, we don't change anything. We might change the ID tag to make it uniform across versions. So, for example, in prior versions of Minecraft, I think in beta, uh, ID tags were integers, and now they're strings. So if we were to load up a beta world, we kind of do a legacy lookup of the integer ID of the entity to the name, and then change it to a string. So when you view it in the world or through an extension or plugin, it all acts the same. You don't have to have that edge case for integer IDs. But for and then when it goes through everything, we don't change anything when we load, but when we save, we go through the entity, the entire NVT, and we look. And if there's any mismatching tag types, we change the tag type to make sure it doesn't crash the game. But then if you have a new tag that we don't know about, we just leave it as is. We don't change it, nothing. So that'll allow future versions, future additions to the MBT format to kind of get ahead of us without crashing Amulet or producing side effects. It also allows you to mess around with the MBT format of snapshots a little bit better. So that's why I'm writing out everything, is because even though the ID tag would be the only thing needed, our system also checks for everything else and changes it as is, because we since we're also hoping to support Bedrock, we also need to take into account that Bedrock at some point or never, depending on how they decide to go with it, can have different representations of things. So like, I don't know, they have uh, they have fire be a float instead of a short for whatever reason. We would have to we have to think kind of in the future, if they change a tag, how can we support it in two different versions? Okay. Yeah. I don't know. It could go either way. I understand your your point. It's just the way I'm going about it. I'm also kind of a city in that way, that I like to just have everything out there just in case, to prevent any mix up. Is there a way to extract MBT data from Java and Bedrock? Or is it just you have to figure it out through the save format? Because I'd be willing to write a script now knowing how the format, we're kind of laying out the format. Probably not today or until this is done for Java 1.13, but just in general. Because I think Java, there might be a way. It might be very kind of hidden in the background. But Bedrock, I have not, I don't know. Because Bedrock's kind of the boogeyman here, because we don't know if they change, if they're planning on changing MBT format or not. And if they do if they change how some tags represented, then that could potentially not be disastrous, but it could throw us for a loop. Since I know, at least for the most part, Java, the Java format's laid onto the wiki pretty verbatim. So they use the same MBT format then. They don't. I don't mean like the way tags represent. I mean like uh the types of tags, like custom name visible. If they change the type of that tag to something else, we have to account for that in the future. That is going to be, or that is probably going to crash. Well, that is true. I'm more mean like Java for the most part, people can inspect, they can decompile, they can view the changes. I'm saying from a Bedrock standpoint, that's not really possible. So if they change something MBT-wise there, that's more of a concern because we can't immediately figure it out from looking at the source code or any other tools that come out to help map things, like what Forge uses to map different versions and figure out what's changed in them. I'm just saying Bedrock's a little more, not secretive, but you can't, it's not as easily decompiled and read, which is kind of my concern, is that we can't look at really the internals too much. Yep, alright, that is recursive. So, in other words, the passengers tag in entities is the format, but entity-wise. So when we load an entity, it only it'll hit the passengers tag here, and then it'll reload. It'll reload the file because it says the tag type is an entity, and then it'll call this file again, hit passengers, and do the same thing over and over again. So I have to figure out how to work that out. Doesn't level DB allow you to list all the keys of a given database? I would not know. I'm still trying to learn the format of level DB. I have not had much experience in that, mostly just because I still use Java, the Java version for like 100%. So I would not know how to do that in level DB. I would assume it's possible though, either with a custom script or via something Mojang has provided or the community has provided. For someone who's knowledgeable about the passengers tag, if a entity in the passengers tag has its own passengers tag, is it uh is it acknowledged or do they just ignore it? So hold on, I'll make a scratch file. So can I have like a passengers So what I'm asking is, for anyone who is knowledgeable, is this sheep ignored or does it chain like that? No, to keep the data. Okay. We're gonna I believe that and I agree with you, but I just want to see what happens. Because if it is, then I might have to stray away from our initial idea of how this would kind of form. Well, the game did freeze for a bit. I'm just gonna... Yep, you're right. Okay. I think it was because night had just hit, so it had to spawn that entity plus a whole bunch else since it's the redstone ready format or preset. But I wouldn't really know. I'm also have an editor open. I'm streaming. I have like 100 tabs in 3 different windows plus Spotify. Probably just the strain on my system. Okay, but it does look like it's recursive. So that I'll get back to that. So actually, that finishes entities. So that's done. So I'm gonna work on the bat. I'm just kind of going down the wiki page here. I forgot that mobs have their own tags. Okay, interesting. And I'm probably going to be taking a break in about 25 minutes, everybody. So just in case you have to leave before then, thank you for coming out to the stream. I've actually learned a lot, and I hope this is at least slightly interesting to everybody. And if not, feel free to let me know how I can improve and or if I should even do these in the future. I know I did one yesterday, but it was pretty much just a random decision. This one was a little bit more planned. So, yeah, feel free to let me know. But I'll be in like 25 minutes, so I'll still be here for a little bit. Yeah, we definitely wanted to involve the community a lot more. It's just in terms of time zones, uh, most times it doesn't work out. So we wanted for dev chats at least. We did one in November. Can you not see? Oh, sorry about that. I have not. I forgot that I had it on the Minecraft. I apologize for that. But I at least want. We definitely want the community to see what we're doing because we feel the most we put out in terms of like documenting what we do, involving everybody in the process, that if there ever comes a time that uh, we cannot respond to an update because life happens, as everyone knows, uh, that there's plenty of resources out there of how we built Amulet and what all the decisions went into using it instead of just having the code there and a little bit of documentation. So we're hoping to kind of have all these resources because then that also helps with plugins and extensions for those who are wanting to learn how to make those. There's all this material for them to look through and figure out why we did certain things the way we did. And that's why we also wanted to use Python 3.7 because we could use type annotations to help give a little more verbosity and explicitly kind of state what uh, each function is expecting when you call it. Yeah, we're hoping to do another dev chat soon. We just want to do it once entities are done. We want to kind of do it at those big milestones, entities and block entities. Once entities is done, we'll probably have another dev chat to kind of just recap that, and then once block entities are done, we'll recap that, and then hopefully from there we'll be very close to an alpha release. So how are we planning on benchmarking the performance? So as of right now, we don't really have a set method. Right now, we kind of just run our tests and see how fast they perform. Mostly just because at this point it does blocks, block loading, which is majority of what would take a little bit of time is right now blocks. Uh, and then we're hoping to kind of do it just based off time for the most part. And then once we get the UI in, see just the frames per second performance and I guess how fast all the operations happen. Right now we haven't really nailed down how to gauge performance besides just how long it takes, which I guess is the go-to benchmarking. We would, however, like it to be faster than MC Edit currently is with saving and stuff like that. But it actually is pretty fast. We actually also use NumPy for it, which is very helpful. We're sticking with NumPy like MC Edit, but in a sense of this, it's I think we have a write up on it on our docs, but I'm not 100% sure. Uh, that is going to be it's going to be a mix, the best of both worlds in terms of how those are done, because NumPy arrays are really fast for numbers, but for strings and stuff like that, it's kind of hard. And objects, it's a little even slower then. So what we do is we have a NumPy array, and it's in indices. So we kind of repaletize. So we load, we look at all the blocks, we see what block states are missing on the on disk palette. We see which of those are missing from our palette, that our Amulet palette, as it were. We add those in, and then we update. We basically then repaletize that entire chunk, that 16 by 16 by 256 column. We basically repaletize it with all the updated indices. So we'll already know about all the old blocks, just the new blocks will have a new index. So, oh, really? Yeah, we we're sticking with palettes, but if you access the NumPy array directly, which I don't know if you even can, but if you were be able to, it'd just be numbers again. But we wanted to we went through a lot of iterations. I think so far everything we've added has gone through at least 2 to 3 iterations. For example, this entity format that I'm currently working on actually is about it's on version 3 or 4, I would say. So it's very much we go back and forth a lot on how we want to implement things in kind of like the most efficient and understandable way, because we definitely want this amulet to be an understandable code base. We don't want there to be a lot of guessing in terms of um, what everything does. So this MBT parser, what are you writing it in? Are you writing it in uh I don't know what languages don't have an MBT parser at this point. I know C has one. We have Python has a lot. Python has a lot. But what language are you writing your MBT parser in, Vincent? Okay. C, okay. I know the one in C hasn't been updated for tag longs, so I'm at least glad that there's going to be a fast C one. We currently use a pure Python implementation of an MBT parser. We don't use the one that's in MC Edit currently. Mostly licensing reasons and uh, other things like that. But we're hoping to write a new MBT parser that kind of we can just drop in as a replacement instead of relying on a pure MBT standpoint because Python is a little slow in terms of for something that for something that's that essential. The one that's currently in C, the current one that the wiki links that's in C, or okay, okay, that was gonna be my question. I could not imagine using linked lists for something like that. Oh, it team is not a tag. That's your parser? Because if so, that oh, could you translate into the Python? Because I would be. Oh, that is a lot of. Do you generate it? Do you have a script that generates that? I hope you do. Or do you just give it like a save file and just have it just churn through all the MBT files in it? Okay. Okay. Because I was about to say the the creating it by hand would have been insane. Alright, so I think that's all good. So we're gonna test out the bat. So this is the first test of a nested hierarchy. So currently the bat extends the mob definitions. The mob definitions extend entity. and the NT doesn't extend anything. So we're going to see, hopefully that works. So I'm just going to give it a vat1. That's going to be so what the templating engine, or I guess you could call it an engine. Uh, so the templating engine basically will take a dictionary. So here's a dictionary. All it's got is the bat flags. That's all it kind of knows about. And then we're going to apply the bat template, which basically just takes, it should take all of these tags and apply the ones that are required to uh, the bat. But in order to do that, I first need to make sure a tag is so I believe that's, sadly, it looks like no NTs do not have a lot of required tags, as you said earlier, Vincent. So this is going to be not a lot of interesting. Okay, so it's inheriting everything, but it's not applying the default tag. Hmm. Oh, I forgot I wasn't printing out the result. So yeah, it seems to be working. The only problem is it seems it's adding an unnecessary uh, tags. which I'll get to next time. So, again, I'd like to thank you all for joining me on the stream, and I look forward to being able to do this hopefully again sometime this week. This is kind of the only week I get to do these. I'll be able to do these for a bit, so hope to get in as many as possible. And I'll try to send out like a usually probably like a 15-minute to an hour heads up on both the Discord and Twitter, just so you all kind of know when they're happening. So again, thank you for coming out and joining me, and I'll see you all later.